Hello everybody, this is Encased. Playing Stygian for a while left me in the mood to play other CRPGs, and luckily there are some that are currently releasing and or in development. So that led me to Encased, a game whose description immediately interested me because it says that it's inspired by stuff like the original Fallouts and also Roadside Picnic, and that just immediately sort of hooked me in to read more about it because the original Fallouts are some of my favorite games. Fallout 2 specifically is just one of my favorite games ever. It's on that short list of my top 10 probably. It's just a game that I absolutely adore despite the problems of those earlier games, like their pacing sometimes. But anyway, it's an awesome game, and there haven't really been very many other games like that, and Roadside Picnic, for those who don't know, is a book, a really interesting book about an anomalous zone and all sorts of various horrible things happening there where those sorts of laws of reality are breaking down, and there are dangerous groups going there for their own reasons. There are artifacts that are created by these reality-breaking events that are very worthwhile for scientific research and for money and whatever other reason someone would go there. And if this sounds familiar to you and you're saying, basically, isn't that Stalker? Well, yes, it actually is. Stalker was directly inspired by Roadside Picnic. The main difference is that in Stalker, the zone is centered around the Chernobyl power plant and all the shenanigans happening there, whereas in Roadside Picnic, the zone is there because aliens. But so this game is directly inspired by those things, and it also says that it's for fans of the Fallout games, Divinity, Original Sin, Wasteland, Shadowrun, and again, all of those games are games that I love, so I hopped into it. So what the heck is it exactly? Well, obviously it's a CRPG, so I tried to get you some different bits of footage in the background, from things like just general exploration to like dialogue trees, because that's important in a CRPG to see how well they actually handle that, and combat as well, obviously. And it feels very Fallout-ish, very Fallout 2, along with a little bit of like Shadowrun and some Divinity as well, although it's definitely not party-based, which makes it feel more like Fallout to me. It's a lot of it you're doing on your own. You can, as far as I'm aware, actually get other people on your side, but just like in Fallout, it's something that is kind of transient. It's not something that happens all the time, like you're always venturing with a party, like in Divinity, for instance. It's something that you can pick up here and there, but for the most part, a lot of your actions are going to be on your own based on your character. And that leads me to the character creation. It's very Fallout, actually, because it has even the sort of standard skills you would expect, like, heavy guns and light guns, energy weapons, mechanics, computers, hacking, lockpicking, thievery, all sorts of other things like that, melee, of course. And all of these skills seem to be on like a 0 to 100 basis, just like in the Fallout games. And also there are these sort of like, I don't want to call them perks because there is a perk window and that's actually different, but they're basically these skills that you can purchase, which I actually like because sometimes it can feel a bit, I guess, a bit too video gamey, which is maybe a weird description to level at CRPG where like a lot of the mechanics are based off of tabletop games, so obviously it's going to feel a bit gamey, that's just how it is. But it can feel kind of arbitrary to have, for instance, you need like 75 lockpicking skill to open this lock, but you have 73, I guess. You can't do it. Like, what does that actually mean? So the way this game does it is when you actually increase those skills, they do increase certain statistical things relating to those, like, higher energy weapons will have you dealing more damage with energy weapons, for instance. But once you reach certain thresholds, you can then use points to purchase specific upgrades or progressions on what you know about that topic, and that is how you actually cross new thresholds to do new things, which I like more. For instance, if you have a certain amount of lockpicking, it doesn't just let you pick locks of a certain difficulty automatically, it's just once you get past a certain number threshold, you will then be able to purchase lockpicking level 3, and then you can pick level 3 locks and below. So it feels a bit less arbitrary. It makes a lot of sense actually, and I actually really like that mechanic. I think it adds a lot to the character building. It definitely adds a lot to the replayability of the game because of all the different topics that are available within these skills and all the sort of various sub-skills they have, like thievery versus lockpicking and things like that. There's like multiple sort of branches that you can go into. And there's also a Fallout-like tagging system where you can select 3 skills to tag, which will automatically increase the level of that skill significantly, as well as make it to where every single skill point you put into it is actually worth 2 skill points. So those will be like your character's specializations, more or less. There's also the really pretty unique and really interesting wing system. There are 5 different wings to the entity that is actually exploring this anomalous wasteland. And you can choose from character creation which of the 5 wings you want to be in, and it's a choice that you make once, so you can't change it anytime you want to. That's like part of your character, which is pretty cool. And these have had a lot of different impacts on gameplay so far, which makes me feel there's going to be a lot of replayability and a lot of interesting different solutions to quests and things because of the wing that your character is a part of. You have the Silver Wing, which are like kind of business-minded managerial types, a very like logistic and statistical brain, it seems like, and a lot of the dialogue options for them have been in things regarding like business and stuff like that. You also have the White Wing, which my character is a part of, which is like the research and development wing. Energy weapons knowledge, lots of research and scanning for artifacts and stuff like that. It's a very much like a scientific discipline. And they tend to prefer non-combat solutions, but they do have energy weapon skills, of course, so you can still blow people up if you want to. The Black Wing is the military wing, and a lot of the dialogue options relating to the Black Wing stuff has been like very military discipline style, stuff like that, and also talking to other soldiers in a way that will have them help you and recognize you as one of their own, basically. So yeah, they're the militaristic types. You also have the Blue Wing, which are very much like the sort of blue-collar workers. They are like the average sort of factory-like workers. They do a lot of different things. They have kind of like a wide discipline, but they're needed just about everywhere. A lot of mechanics and stuff like that are blues. And then you have the Orange Wing, which is pretty interesting. They're convicts, actually. So a lot of people don't trust them and don't really like them all that much. They're very much the sort of low-grade manual labor that does a lot of the hard, like, labor workforce style of stuff, carrying heavy things, cleaning stuff, that sort of thing. And that seems to be the kind of wing that you'd want to choose, for instance, if you wanted to play like a stealthy, stabby stab, kind of sneaky and like thief sort of character. And because a lot of your dialogue options seem to deal with things that are kind of, you have lots of dirty connections and things like that. But I suppose you could also probably sort of cast off the mold of like the convict and redeem yourself if you wanted as well, because there seems to be quite a few options in regards to these wings, and that's pretty cool actually. That means that after you create your character, there are tons and tons of various different solutions and things that you'll find to various problems that will be related to your expertise. And of course you can also choose what skills you want to tag and things like that after you do this, so that you'll create a very unique character. I feel there's a lot of room in the character creation, just like in the Fallouts and Divinity as well, for making a pretty unique character that will play very differently from any other character you might make later. So that does enhance things like replayability and the idea that you're going to be finding a lot of different solutions to your problems depending on how and who you're actually playing. The combat is a turn-based, action point-based system. Again, very familiar if you've played Fallout or Divinity. That is... It's not really grid-based, but it has, different movement lengths, probably depending on your various stats, take up different amounts of AP to actually move across, and you use the AP to also do various things like swing with melee weapons, do a heavy swing, do special types of shots, like a crippling shot, or a headshot, or like a powerful energy shot, and things like that. And there are all sorts of pieces of equipment to actually aid in the combat, of course. You've got a ton of different melee weapons, from like pipe wrenches to crowbars to hammers to shovels, and other things in terms of projectile weapons. I've seen pistols, rifles of various kinds, like assault rifles versus longer range, like almost, it looks like sort of like a scout rifle or like a DMR kind of thing. And I've also seen a lot of energy weapons and other heavier weapons. I've seen a grenade launcher at one point, and unfortunately I do not have the stats to use it, and it was very heavy to pick up, so I left it, which hurt a little bit, but that's an item for a different character. And as I mentioned, there are some other exotic things like these energy weapons, and there are also lots of relics to find and stuff like that. So there's definitely a lot to explore and do. Although I will say, in the game's current state right now, given that it is in early access, it's also fairly short, despite the fact that the areas are pretty expansive, the areas that are already in the game, and there's a lot of ways around them and a lot of ways to solve the problems you'll come across, depending on what sort of character you're playing. They are fairly limited in number. The areas themselves, there aren't too many, and you will find yourself reaching the end of this, what's currently available in the campaign, fairly quickly. Although, of course, there is a promise for a lot more content in the future, and so far, what's in here is really well developed, which is actually more important to me. The quality of what's currently available is higher than the quantity, and so far it is. It seems like every area they've put in the game so far, they've put in a fairly finished state with a lot of different ways to go through it, which means it doesn't feel like a skeletal framework of a game that's perhaps long but narrow. It feels like the areas they're putting in are pretty fleshed out before they actually put them in, so there are fewer of them, but they're each a lot deeper, which helps with the exploration and the replayability and stuff to make it feel like you're not kind of railroaded along the same path each playthrough, so that helps. It also has pretty much all of the various mechanics that you would sort of expect and hope for in a large game like this. Its world is pretty open, and you can actually drive vehicles around them, a very Fallout 2 style, and there is actually even a driving skill that you can invest in. And there's also a crafting system. You can find various materials around the place and craft them. You can cook food. You can even load your own bullets and things if you want to, if you have the casings and the powder and stuff, which is pretty cool. There are even actually drugs in the game, which very much reminds me of chems from Fallout in the way that they are potentially dangerous and have side effects and possible addiction and things, but they're quite useful in combat and some other situations where these skills, upping these skills really matter. So it feels very Fallout in that regard. Actually, to be honest, if you can't tell already, it just feels very Fallout in general, although it does have an identity of its own. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be Fallout too hard, but you will find a lot of references and things. I mean, even in a diner you can come across earlier that you may have seen is even called Roadside Picnic, so it wears its influences on its sleeve very much, but it still does have its own identity, and it is a pretty interesting game so far. It is available in early access right now for $30, which I wanted to say seems... that's expensive. For what the game currently offers, it has a really good depth of stuff already, but it's fairly short, so you'll have to kind of decide if you feel the replayability on offer is enough for you for that much money. But I will say, if you do feel that that's maybe a little bit too much, but you are still very interested in the game, wishlist it. Do feel free to wishlist it, because wishlisting actually does genuinely help developers. They've actually told me this before, that it is actually a useful metric. It is important to them. So if you want to keep an eye on it, but you don't yet feel that it might be worth your money exactly, you want to wait till there's a bit more content patches and stuff in the future, wishlist it and keep track of it that way, because that'll help them and it'll help you to actually get notifications as it develops and things. So yeah, that is Encased. It is a really interesting CRPG so far. It brings me back to playing Fallout 2 for the first time, and that's a very good feeling. So the fact that it is able to evoke that kind of atmosphere and that sort of role-playing environment is a really good thing for me, because I definitely love those games, and I really want to see more very hardcore CRPGs like that actually succeed with all your various dialogue choices and your huge trees and all your skills and all that sort of role-playing pen and paper stuff. I'll also say that there seems to be a pretty interesting research system in that you have a scanner at all times, and in fact one of the various NPCs actually teaches you in the beginning to use it, and scanning stuff is important. You can scan bodies to find out who they are and how they died, which might be useful for investigative quests and the like, which is super cool. And you can scan all these sorts of artifacts around the place, because the main theme is that you're in this dome, which is like a sort of ruined, anomalous part of the planet, and it has all these various weird bits of technology and this all sorts of unknown stuff in it, basically like artifacts from Stalker and the like, and you can scan them to try and figure out how they work and what they are, and sometimes the scanner doesn't even know exactly, but there are certain recordings that you make that you can read for everything you scan to sort of help get an idea of the world around you, which definitely adds to the environmental world building and storytelling, because you can scan all these things to sort of learn what all this may have been and sort of piece together bits of story for yourself, which is really, really cool and very enticing for people like me. There's even a Stalker-like system of anomalies and getting through anomalies. You will sometimes find, various bits where reality is a little screwed up, so you'll find these big clouds of electricity that will discharge huge bursts, like the anomalies in Stalker, and also things like the fruit punch anomalies, which are like those big glowing green pools of acid that if you step in, they'll dissolve you and stuff like that. And you even have a bolt. You can throw bolts in these anomalies to discharge them and run through, or to search for them if you think that something might be an anomaly but you can't quite tell. You can toss a bolt into it and see what happens. It's very Stalker/Roadside Picnic, and that definitely adds to the exploration. You combine that sort of Stalker level exploration to the Fallout level role-playing systems, and you get a really interesting experience. And I think that it's definitely something that you should keep an eye on if you're interested in either of those things, or just sort of hardcore RPGs in general, because it's actually a pretty special combination, and those are two huge things that I absolutely love, and I'm always looking for new and other versions of. So seeing a game that brings them together in a pretty cohesive and interesting way in a really neat world that's fun to explore definitely makes me hopeful for the future of the game and what it can actually become. So that is Encased in its current state. It's something I can highly recommend that you at least consider or take more looks at from other videos and the like, and see if you think that the current price matches the current amount of, value that you might be able to get out of it. And if not, definitely do keep an eye on it, wishlist it and so forth, so that you can keep track of it, because I think it's going to be something pretty special. So far, it's had a lot of love and attention put into it by people that clearly know what they're doing and what they want to make. And also, I can't help but notice that one of the original sort of big backers of this game was actually Larian Studios themselves, the people that made the Divinity games. So I think if that doesn't show you that a lot of people in pretty high places actually value what this game is doing and see a lot of potential in it, then, well, it definitely does. So thank you guys very much for watching. This is Encased once again, and if you like this video, feel free to hit the like button. If you did not like this video, feel free to hit the dislike button and tell me why. Thanks again, and check this one out, you guys. I'll see you next time.